A report by the Australian Human Rights Commission has condemned the policy of mandatory detention. It says asylum seekers being held at the Curtin detention centre in Western Australia's northwest are being irreparably damaged by being held indefinitely. Andrew O'Connor reports.
When the Commission visited the desert detention camp, it was home to more than 1,400 men. What it found there has escalated its concerns over the mandatory detention policy.
It's a very remote place, it's a harsh environment, and people are held there for long and indefinite periods of time. We know this is very damaging to people's mental health.
The report says with a high number of detainees at the centre, the Commission's concerned about the high rates of self-harm and the risk of suicide. It says the practice of prolonged detention with lengthy immigration processing delays takes a heavy toll on asylum seekers.
And what we heard was that people think about self-harm. There have been disturbing numbers of self-harm incidents in Curtin. There's been one apparent suicide and another death.
After escaping the continuing violence in Afghanistan and Pakistan, members of the Afghan Hazara minority are among those in the Curtin centre. The Hazara community agrees detainees are being harmed by being locked away.
As well as those who released from detention, we can see them. They are really damaged too, so mentally damaged.
A statement issued by the Minister's office says people are held in detention for as little time as possible and says the government is constantly working to improve the conditions of detention and to move children and vulnerable people into community-based accommodation arrangements. But the Commission says it's not just children who are vulnerable. The men at Curtin are also suffering.
They're suffering in very obvious ways and in ways that might be lasting. When people's mental health is damaged in this way, our previous experiences tells us that they may not recover.
There are also concerns about another West Australian detention centre, this time in the goldfields town of Leonora. 72 unaccompanied minors are being housed there after being flown from Christmas Island. They had been targeted for offshore processing under the government's Malaysian solution, but with that policy now in disarray, they've been moved to the mainland. WA Premier Colin Barnett believes they won't be the last and that there'll now be increased pressure on centres like Leonora.
Well, the numbers are growing, and Leonora was always going to be only for family groups. And the school and health suppliers and local policing and the community have worked within that. Certainly I'd prefer to see these teenagers who are unaccompanied go to Leonora and be within Australia than the federal government's proposal to send some of them to Malaysia. I think that is just unconscionable. But however, now the numbers are growing, and given that the age of many of these is sort of older teenagers rather than 13 or 14-year-olds, that does raise some issues, and the state government is looking at that now.
The Commission says the government should pursue community-based alternatives to detention. Andrew O'Connor, Lateline.